This case does involve the death of a child, so if this is a topic you are sensitive about, that's okay. Just skip this case as it might not be for you. It's Christmas Eve in 2010 when a local food mart would receive a phone call around 2 p.m. The manager answered the call and the person on the other end said they were looking for Angela Davis, who was a cashier at the store. The manager says she couldn't come to the phone as it was busy, but the caller was adamant that it was an emergency and Angela needed to go home. So Angela quickly rushes home, the absolute worst scenarios running through her mind because her 12-year-old son Jonathan was home alone. Could there have been a fire? Did Jonathan get horribly injured that he needed to go to the hospital? While all of these thoughts are running through her mind, she decided to call Jonathan and ask him what was going on. And when the line connected, a woman with a raspy voice that she didn't recognize picked up. She could hear the woman asking her son Jonathan if Angela was his mother, to which Jonathan said, "Yes, Angela is my mother." Then the line went dead. After this worrying phone call, Angela rushed home as fast as she could, and when she got there, she heard cartoons playing in the background and saw a game up on the computer screen. But Jonathan was nowhere to be seen. She also noticed that the landline phone was missing. The base was there, but the actual phone wasn't. She immediately called her ex David, who was also Jonathan's stepfather, about what just happened, but he believed it was just a prank and he blew her off. That's when she reported Jonathan missing to the police around 3:45 p.m. Investigators show up very quickly to the apartment of Sharon Enamorado, a friend of Angela who was letting her and Jonathan stay with her until Angela could find somewhere after her breakup with David a month prior. Police try and gather as much information as possible as time is of the essence in missing persons cases. Typically, you have at most 72 hours to find the person alive before you switch to trying to locate a body. And at first, police struggled to figure out the situation because Angela and David were giving very conflicting stories. Initially, they claimed Jonathan was with a babysitter at the apartment, but they later admitted he was actually home alone. Their strange behavior, coupled with the fact David had motive to hurt Jonathan, immediately turned them into suspects. The reason David and Angela broke up was because Angela believed he slapped Jonathan across the face when she wasn't around. David, of course, denied the allegations. He claimed he just slapped a hat off of Jonathan's head one time, and he probably just told his mother he was hit in the face. David was eventually cleared as a suspect as he was seen on security cameras drinking at a bar for several hours when the phone call to Angela was made. As both David and Angela were cleared as suspects, police had to try and look elsewhere. Their next big break in the case would come on December 28th, 4 days after Jonathan was reported missing. A person walking in an industrial park on East Hardy Road in Houston stumbled across a rolled-up carpet partially inside a concrete culvert. And inside the carpet was the burned body of a child with their hands tied behind their back with twine, left there in the drainage ditch like garbage. The identity of the child was not immediately known as the body was burned beyond recognition. Police didn't know what they were dealing with. All they know is whoever did this was a sick and twisted individual with zero regard for this child. All they could hope for at this point was that the body would be identified through dental records and missing persons reports. And to the dismay of Jonathan's family, they got a match that positively ID'd the remains as 12-year-old Jonathan Foster, who was found only 5 miles from where he lived at Sharon's apartment, which was so devastating and not the outcome anyone was hoping for. And even though with cases like this, you know the chances of survival aren't high, you still want to hold out hope that your child will come home safely. Angela was especially hoping he would come home safe. She stated a couple days prior to the discovery of Jonathan, "It breaks my heart that my baby is out there. I don't know if he eats. I don't know if he's sleeping. I don't know if someone has hurt him. I don't know." Angela has always struggled with motherhood, and she wasn't ready to take care of another person as she could barely take care of herself. Jonathan was born November of 1998, and she had gotten very involved into drugs and alcohol. So at the age of 6, Jonathan was raised in Missouri on a farm by his Uncle Glenn alongside with his wife and 5 other children. Jonathan was described as being a happy kid who always had a smile on his face and loved helping people. Glenn said Jonathan was a little behind for his age, but it didn't matter as he was so wonderful that he was like a son to him. In November of 2009 is when Jonathan went back to Texas to live with his grandmother after not seeing his mom for almost 6 years. And all Jonathan wanted for Christmas that year was to spend time with his mom. So he went to stay with her for the holidays. Angela had just gotten her son back after not being able to be a part of half of his life. She was ready to start fresh when Jonathan's life would be tragically cut short after only 3 weeks of living together. Unfortunately, the autopsy didn't yield much evidence because the body had been so badly burned they couldn't even determine the cause of death, let alone get any usable evidence. It was noted that Jonathan had a giant bruise in the center of his chest from being punched, and there were indications that a torch of some kind was used on him pre-mortem. After this shocking discovery, investigators tried tracking down suspects. Jonathan's grandmother also gave police the potential lead of Jonathan's biological father, Richard Foster. She believed he might have taken her grandson because he had done it before, but he had never been charged with anything. Unfortunately, this lead wouldn't pan out as Richard Foster was cleared by the FBI and he had a solid alibi at the time of Jonathan's disappearance. After the likely suspects had been cleared, police turned to Sharon in Alvarado. She was questioned about her whereabouts on the afternoon of the disappearance, and she said she was working. But she did run into her old friend, Mona Nelson, who she invited over for a Christmas party at her apartment the day of the 24th. Sharon also told Mona to tell Jonathan that Aunt Sharon said it was okay to let her in because she knew Mona would be there before she got back from work and that Jonathan probably wouldn't let her in as he didn't open the door for strangers. And Mona said that's exactly what happened when she was questioned. She admitted to meeting Jonathan, but it was through the door as he wouldn't open it. Then after a while, she left and never saw him again. Mona Nelson, however, was a very interesting suspect. She had twins at the age of 16 and dropped out of high school, and ever since she has had issues with the law. At the age of 19 in 1984, she was arrested for aggravated robbery, though at the time she claimed it wasn't her idea and that a man forced her to do it. She received 10 years of probation, and over the next 25 years, she would be arrested nearly a dozen more times. One of her arrests was very interesting. In 2001, she was arrested for assaulting her then-girlfriend and 3 neighborhood children she was babysitting, but her girlfriend decided not to press charges. Mona, around this time, was also trying to become a boxer. She was 5'11", 225 pounds, and she thought she had a shot at becoming a pro. But she lost quite a few matches and got suspended, then failed out of the circuit. Then, in 2008, around the end of her boxing career, Mona's daughter Ava wound up with a black eye and a bloody face caused by her mother. But she too declined to press charges as it was just a misunderstanding. And she was grateful that Mona helped her raise her kids, so how could she press charges on her? After this failed boxing career, Mona for the most part was a maintenance worker for apartment complexes, including the apartment complex right across the street from where Jonathan lived, at Aunt Sharon's. In her free time, she was also a welder and sold pretty much anything she could get her hands on. So we know she had contact with Jonathan, and she was capable of violence. And to top it off, investigators looked at the CCTV footage across the street from where Jonathan's body was found, and on December 24th at 6:06 p.m., only a couple hours after Jonathan's disappearance, is when a silver pickup truck that looked a lot like Mona's was seen parked near the ditch. You can also see that someone gets out and pulls a large object out of the bed of the truck before dumping it in the concrete culvert. The person can also be seen hiding behind a truck when a nearby car passes by. Along with this evidence, there was eyewitness testimony placing the same truck at the apartment at the time of Jonathan's abduction. After confronting Mona with this information, she then confessed to dumping Jonathan's body but not killing him. And once again, just like when she was 19 and charged with robbery, she shifted the blame to some fictitious boogeyman. She said she was paid $20 by David, Jonathan's stepfather, to dispose of some trash. but she didn't know what the trash was because she was so drunk on vodka that she didn't bother to look into the carpet. She had no idea that what she disposed of was Jonathan until investigators showed her photos during her interrogation. And we know that this cannot be the case as David had a solid alibi. I also don't know why Mona thinks investigators are so stupid, but even if you were hired by somebody to dispose of some garbage, why would you pick a concrete culvert to do it? There are plenty of other dump sites to get rid of something if you really thought what you were carrying was not suspicious. So her story just really doesn't make any sense. Houston police officer Mike Miller, after her interrogation, would also go to say, "There has only been 1 or 2 people I've ever talked to that had eyes like she did. It was pretty cold." When asked if he believed she'd done it before, he said, "Yeah, I do. I don't believe she began and ended with the abduction of Jonathan Foster. I don't." A search of Mona's home would be the final nail in her coffin, as there was an abundance of evidence found. They found a similar twine that was used to bind Jonathan's hands, as well as acetylene tanks, oxygen tanks, and a cutting torch that matched his injuries. In her trash can, they found Jonathan's Looney Tunes sweatshirt, pieces of carpet that match what he was wrapped in, and the leaves from her house matched the leaves found near the crime scene. And those leaves could have only come from her house, as there were no trees in the area that had those leaves. Mona Nelson was arrested December 30th of 2010 and was convicted on capital murder charges, and she showed no emotion during the entire process. A lot of people theorize that her motives behind this crime had to be because she was under the influence of alcohol at the time of Jonathan's murder. They believe she went to the apartment, and when Jonathan wouldn't let her in, she got so angry and she punched him in the chest before calling his mother to make sure she was at work, then abducting him, murdering him in her house, and then dumping him in the culvert. Aside from her drunken anger, there's never really been a clear motive in this case. This clear lack of motive is also what has led investigators to believing Jonathan was not her only victim. They think he was just a victim of opportunity, and she pounced on that opportunity to take his life. To this day, she also claims to be innocent. Her entire defense was centered around the fact that she is a loving grandmother who adores children. She said at her trial, "I am not a monster. I have 5 grandkids and I love kids." And believe it or not, she actually has a fair amount of supporters. When I typed Mona Nelson into Google to research this case, this was the first thing that popped up. Absolutely disgusting. The fact she has so many supporters that would warrant her website popping up as the first search result. She is also actively still trying to get out of jail, as she claims she is innocent and is hoping to garner enough support to overturn her conviction. The aftermath of this case left Jonathan's family very divided. His uncle Glenn thought Jonathan never should have been allowed to live with his sister Angela, as he thought that she was still an unfit mother. He said he had no idea Jonathan was living with her again, and if he did, he would have objected to it, as he didn't think staying with her was in Jonathan's best interest. Well, that's it for this case. I will see you guys next week.